I am artist Lillian Gray, and I have someone you need to meet, South African artist Vladimir Tretiakov. Tretiakov was an artist whose painting Chinese Girl, popularly known as the Green Lady, is one of the best-selling art prints of the 20th century. His most famous artworks includes Chinese Girl, Mrs. Wong, and the Balinese Girl. But he was sneered at by the elitist art world and often called the king of kitsch. But Tretiakov has made a fortune by defying the art establishment. He was one of the first pop stars of the art world, and even though art critics hated him, he has broken sales and attendance records. Let's quickly look at the dates Tretiakov lived, 1913 to 2006. By looking at these dates, we gather that he lived for a long time, and he survived quite a lot. World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, the 50s, the 60s, apartheid rule in South Africa, the neon 80s, the liberation of South Africa with Nelson Mandela, the establishment of the Rainbow Nation, and even the turn of the millennium. That is indeed a long life, 93 years to be exact. Tretiakov was born in 1913 in Russia. Wait a minute, Lillian, you just introduced Tretiakov as a South African artist, but he's born in Russia? Precisely. Listen to the story and you will know why Tretiakov is regarded as a South African artist, or by some, a South African-ish artist. Tretiakov's life is filled with beautiful places, from the plains of Siberia to the bustle of Shanghai, to Japanese-occupied Java to the sun-drenched Cape Town. Tretiakov's story is indeed filled with crazy adventures, narrow escapes, a heart-wrenching love story, and eventually world fame. So I hope you are settled in comfortably and ready to listen to the remarkable story of artist Vladimir Tretiakov. Okay, so Tretiakov was born one day after Christmas in 1913 in the Russian Empire. Vladimir Tretiakov was the youngest of 8 children in a well-off family. Now, at this time in Russia, this is quite important. You see, most of Russia's people were poor, in fact very poor, and Russia was ruled by the Tsar Nicholas, and he was seen as the divine ordained ruler of Russia. So nobody voted for him to lead Russia. He was born into royalty. The Tsar's family had all this wealth, palaces, gold, jewels, and lots of lands, while the people of Russia suffered and starved. Eventually, the people of Russia had had enough. They wanted Tsar Nicholas gone, and they wanted to share all the wealth. This movement is called the Russian Revolution, and it happened in 1970. Tretiakov's dad started feeling very scared. You see, Tretiakov's family had money and a nice big home. They were scared that the people would storm their house, kill them, and take all their land. So Tretiakov's family packed their bags and fled to China. In China, the Tretiakovs were refugees. The father couldn't find work, and they lived in this makeshift house. They were so poor and cold. At the tender age of 11, Tretiakov's mother died. And when Tretiakov saw his mother busy dying, he grabbed a sketch pad and a pencil and started drawing her face frantically. They couldn't afford photography, and he was afraid he would forget her face forever. Tretiakov's father couldn't deal with losing the love of his life. He didn't want to live without his wife. So one day he left home and was never to be seen again. It is believed that he walked into a frozen river and drowned. The Tretiakov children were now without parents. They had to fend for themselves and quickly find jobs. Tretiakov always wanted to be an artist and was so obsessed with drawing and painting. He dreamt of being an artist in Paris one day, so he set out to find a job using art. He found a job as a painter at the Chinese City Russian Opera House. He often helped by mixing colors and painting sections of the performers' backdrops. And so Trechikov managed to stay in school until the age of 16. At the age of 15, there was an art competition. Artists were asked to paint portraits of Chinese and Russian leaders for a boardroom. Trechikov entered the competition, not mentioning his age, and to his family's surprise, he won. And with all that prize money, Trechikov and his brother decided to leave school and to leave China. They wanted to go to Paris. Unfortunately, the money wasn't enough and they only got as far as Shanghai. So they decided to rent a flat, get other tenants to join them to increase the income, and once they had enough money, then they would leave for Paris. Trechikov started working as a graphic designer. That is a commercial artist, which means you get to create pictures and advertisements for clients. Trechikov also started making cartoons for local Russian and English language magazines. At a dance, Trechikov met the most beautiful woman he has ever seen, Natalie, and they started dating, forming quite a serious relationship. Trechikov's family advised against it, and his one brother said, "You will find yourself married before you even launch your art career." And they convinced Trechikov to go for his art career and leave Natalie behind. Trechikov applied for a job in Singapore as an art director, so he kissed Natalie goodbye and left for Singapore by boat. On the boat, Trechikov realized he made a terrible mistake. He couldn't live without Natalie, so he sent her a telegram asking her to marry him. Arriving at Singapore's harbour, he wasn't sure what Natalie's answer would be, but he received a telegram at the dock. Natalie was already on her boat, on her way to him, and they married the day she arrived. And soon they had a bouncing baby girl called Minnie. In Singapore, Trechikov worked as a graphic designer at an advertising agency. He was determined to be famous, so he would ensure Natalie and himself would get invited to every single important party. They often didn't have money for fancy dresses for Natalie, so Trechikov made dresses for his wife to attend wealthy functions. They soon became friends with the high and mighty of Singapore. In 1940, the Second World War spread to the Pacific. Trechikov became a propaganda artist working for the British Ministry of Information, drawing cartoons in favor of the British and joking with the Japanese. World War II approached fast and eventually Singapore was under siege. The country decided to evacuate women and children first. They knew the Japanese were listening, so they couldn't tell the families where they were taking the women and the children. For Natalie and his daughter's Mimi's safety, Trechikov had to load them onto a ship, not knowing if he would ever see them again. Eventually, men were allowed to leave Singapore, but only with a permission slip. But because of all of Trechikov's important rich friends, his name was on the list of men allowed to leave. Soon after they left, the ship was bombed by the Japanese. Only 42 people survived, and Trechikov managed to escape on one of the lifeboats. They decided to row to the closest place of safety, Sumatra. Once they could see land, they realized the Japanese have already invaded. They had to keep rowing, so they decided to continue to Java. They rowed to Java, which took another 19 days. And when they got to Java, it was also occupied. Food has now run out, and they desperately needed supplies. They sailed past the rural huts, trying to get the locals to help them, but nobody could understand them. When asking for food at a particular hut, Trechikov saw crayons and paper in the corner, and he started drawing what happened to them. With the pictures, he could explain their saga and their plight. The ship being bombed, them escaping on a rowboat and rowing for more than 800 kilometers. Soon, a man ordered his wife to bring fresh fruit and pots of rice. This is such a great situation where art literally saved their lives, because art is a universal language. Everybody can understand pictures. Unfortunately, Tretyakov was caught by the Japanese and imprisoned. The cell that he was kept in was designed for only 8 people, but instead they had 35 people crammed in there. Nobody could sit or stretch or even stand properly. Tretyakov demanded to be released because he was a Russian citizen and they had no right to keep him. Russia was not at war with Japan. But then they found the cartoon Tretyakov drew ridiculing the Japanese and said, "If you are not at war with us, then what is this?" They locked up Tretyakov for another 3 months and eventually let him out on parole, forcing him to design propaganda posters for the Japanese war machine. Tretyakov wasn't allowed to leave the country, and he had no idea if his wife and child were even still alive. However, he met Lenka. Her husband was in prison, and Tretyakov wasn't sure if he'll ever see his wife again. So she asked Tretyakov to come and live in the back garden in a cottage and make that his studio. And eventually Tretyakov asked her to pose for him, and she became one of his most famous models. They found some art supplies, and Tretyakov had lots and lots of time to paint. And he painted every single day when he wasn't working for the Japanese government. And he always used to tell Lenka, "One day I will go and find my wife and child, and I will have a solo exhibition with all these paintings." When World War II ended, Tretyakov left Indonesia for South Africa. He went looking for his wife and daughter, determined to find them. He concluded that the ship that left Shanghai either traveled to Australia or South Africa, and he decided to start looking in Cape Town. One day, while working in Cape Town, he heard somebody talk about a woman called Natalie that was giving Russian language lessons in Cape Town. And he thought to himself, "That must be my wife. Could it be?" He started running towards her. And it was Natalie. They found each other. Later, when asked about his nationality, Tretyakov would say, "I am South African. This is my lucky country. This is the country that gave me back the love of my life and my daughter." Tretyakov spent the rest of his life living in South Africa. He referred to himself as a South African artist. He only spent a small amount of his childhood in Russia, but most of his life in South Africa. He always said Russia only gave him war and pain, but South Africa gave him the love of his life. Once reunited with Natalie, it was time for Tretyakov's big solo art show. He brought all the paintings he has done in his time with Lenka, and he wanted to exhibit at a gallery. At this time in South Africa, Irma Stern was quite an established artist. She was well known on the art scene and respected for her understanding of German Expressionism. Irma heard about this artist from Russia and wanted to see Tretyakov's work. She glanced at the work and left without an opinion. When Tretyakov tried to confirm his booking with the gallery, they have cancelled it, and he couldn't understand why. Later it was revealed that Irma Stern went to the gallery and said, "You cannot possibly exhibit that rubbish of Tretyakov." You see, Irma Stern believed in German Expressionism, and she didn't like Tretyakov's style at all. Tretyakov found another small little unknown gallery to exhibit his work, and he made it his mission to draw as many people as possible. His exhibition was a success. He managed to draw twice as many people to his exhibition than Irma Stern and Maggie Loubser had at theirs. This had such a great impact that a department store contacted Tretyakov. They wanted to draw crowds of people to their shop, so they offered to pay for all of Tretyakov's expenses if he would exhibit in their store. So Tretyakov said yes. Now at the time, this was quite unconventional. Artists needed to exhibit in galleries to be taken seriously, but Tretyakov decided he doesn't need the galleries. The 11-day show clocked up no fewer than 34,000 visitors. After that success, he vowed never to exhibit in galleries again, but only department stores. His next exhibition was in Stutterfords in Cape Town, and 5,000 people attended the opening, and he signed 2,000 prints. It had over 50,000 visitors in 10 days. And then he moved the show to Joburg Stutterfords, who had 69,000 people. These turnouts really fueled the battle between art critics and the elitist art world with the fame of Tretyakov. The media called his pictures chocolate box pictures, or they look like toothpaste adverts. And to this, Tretyakov would just reply, well, Toulouse-Lautrec was a poster artist for the Moulin Rouge, and he became the toast of Paris. Tretyakov always said, are 100,000 people wrong and a handful of art critics right? And so Tretyakov positioned himself as the artist of the people. He wanted everybody to be able to afford a beautiful piece of artwork in their home. So he signed a contract with a big printing company and started selling prints of his artwork. This was a great way to make a deal with the department stores to exhibit his art. People would buy a print, get it signed in store by Tretyakov, and then also buy the frame from the department store. Between 1948 and 1952, Tretyakov clocked over 250,000 attendees at his art exhibitions. Now, why on earth was his art so popular? And who bought it and why? Tretyakov never really painted white people, but his customers were white. He painted portraits of Indonesian people, Chinese people, Cape Malays, Zulus, and Xhosas. We will discuss some reasons on why his art created such a hype a little bit later. But let's just consider, this is the time of apartheid in South Africa, where people were sorted and divided according to race. Do you think the apartheid government liked Tretyakov's art? Do you think they liked it that he painted all these different kinds of people from different cultures that weren't like him? Do you think they liked that he celebrated people that are other or different? Well, soon Tretyakov was invited to come and exhibit in America. But 2 months before his departure to the USA, somebody broke into the storeroom where his paintings were kept and sliced them all to shreds with a knife. Works by other artists renting the same storeroom was not damaged. Tretyakov quickly decided to move his other paintings to his house, but he had 7 paintings hanging in quite large frames in his studio, set up for a film shoot, and 4 nights later an intruder returned and also slashed these with a knife. He was devastated. He didn't have enough time to complete more works for his USA exhibition, and he thought that maybe somebody from the art community that hated his art and style so much, or even the government, was behind all of this. First, Tretyakov exhibited at a small gallery in America and drew large numbers of people. Once he had this as proof, he went to the department stores in America and asked them if he could duplicate his success in South Africa by exhibiting in their store. First, they were very skeptical, not believing that Tretyakov could draw so many people. But he had his statistics from his show in America, so they gave it a shot. And so Tretyakov launched his American tour. Around 57,000 people saw his show in Los Angeles and 52,000 in San Francisco. In Seattle, a rival show, which included Picasso and Rothko, had far less attendees. Not knowing of the drama Tretyakov created back in South Africa, US reporters called him South Africa's most astounding artist. Tretyakov's strategy was working. He believed let highbrow art remain in galleries, and he would exhibit where the public went, department stores. The show also ended up traveling to Canada. In 1962, Tretyakov had a large exhibition at Harrods in London. This exhibition was attended by a whopping 205,000 visitors. By now, Tretyakov was super wealthy. Him and Natalie had a large house in Cape Town. They had lots of fast cars and all the luxuries they ever dreamed of. Tretyakov's wealth protected him from the art critics, and every time they would sneer at him in the press, he would simply say, "Well, I'm laughing all the way to the bank." Let's look at one of the paintings he created that helped him create this world fame. His Chinese Girl, a 1952 painting featured Eastern model Monica with blue-green skin, is one of the best-selling prints of the 20th century. More than 500,000 print copies have been sold. Singer David Bowie once said that if he could own any painting in the world, it would be The Green Lady by Tretyakov. David Bowie also grew up with a Tretyakov print above the mantel in their living room, and rumor has it that is what his famous song, Little China Girl, is based on. Prints of this painting became widespread during the 1950s and 1960s, and the painting was featured in various plays and pop culture, such as Alfred Hitchcock's movies and Monty Python's Flying Circus. Other popular paintings of Oriental figures were Mrs. Wong, Lady from Orient, and Balinese Girl. Eventually, the frenzy to own a Tretyakov print died down and things became a bit more calm. But by that time, Natalie and Tretyakov were already wealthy and settled. Interest in his artworks underwent a resurgence in the late 1990s as part of a revival of 1950s retro decor, and people wanted these Tretyakovs in their houses again. The most expensive Tretyakov painting sold to this day is Chinese Girl, that sold for more than 17 million rand. Tretyakov suffered a stroke in 2002 which left him unable to paint, and he died the 26th of August in 2006 in Cape Town, which was his home since 1946. He was survived by his wife Natalie, his daughter Mimi, 4 granddaughters and 5 great-grandchildren. Natalie died soon after, in 2007. Throughout his entire life, the elitist art scene never accepted Tretyakov. The South African National Gallery never bought a Tretyakov painting. When asked about it, they said, "It does not meet the standards of quality and excellence required for the gallery." But on another occasion, they admitted, "The truth is that we cannot afford any of his paintings. And even if they could, his best works were now no longer available. The artist had sold them long ago, and the owners had no intention of parting with them." Tretyakov once said that the only difference between himself and Vincent van Gogh was that Van Gogh starved and he had become rich. One of Tretyakov's admirers said, "You put a brick in the Tate Modern today and it's art. Who decided that the Green Lady is kitsch? Not the hundreds of thousands of people who bought it." Another admirer of Tretyakov said, "He achieved everything that Andy Warhol stated he wanted to do but could never achieve because of his coolness." Soon after his death, the Tretyakov Trust was established. The trust is based on Tretyakov's life motto: express your passion, do whatever you love, take action no matter what. And today you can still buy various Tretyakov products like pillows and bags in various stores. It was only many years after his death that the South African National Gallery decided to have an exhibition in Tretyakov's honor. Finally, his art would be kind of accepted in the highbrow art society. And that is the story of the incredible Tretyakov. Now let's quickly look at the what, where, how, and why. The what. What did Tretyakov paint? Tretyakov was a self-taught artist who painted realistic figures, portraits, still life, animals. It's important to note that his art included absolutely no politics. South Africans were really scared of communism and called it the Rooi Gevaar, so there are no references to Russia in his artworks. The where. Where did Tretyakov paint? His subjects was often inspired by his early life in China, Singapore, Indonesia, and later his life in South Africa and its wonderful cultures. Tretyakov didn't show at galleries. He exhibited his art at shopping malls and massive department stores because he believed that that is where the people are. The how. What was Tretyakov's painting style? He is known and placed under the movement symbolic realism. What on earth is symbolic realism? Well, let me explain by showing you this artwork. It's called The Lost Orchid. First, we notice the style of painting. The orchid is drawn with a lot of detail and looks very real. But the orchid is also a symbol, meaning more than just a normal flower. You see, Tretyakov spotted this disregarded orchid on the steppes when he left the war camp and was released on parole in Indonesia. Now back then, orchids were 10 times more expensive than roses. It was a massive luxury to be given an orchid. On closer inspection, we can see a pin inserted into the orchid, almost as if it was used as a corsage at an event or a festival. Tretyakov stopped and looked at this beautiful flower discarded on these steps amongst the rubbish, and he saw these little dew drops gathering on the petals, and he felt as if the flower was weeping. How could somebody use such beauty and just throw it away? He felt like the flower was left alone crying. We could now possibly see this flower as a symbol for the destruction of beauty in a war-torn country. Tretyakov worked in oils, watercolors, ink, charcoal and pencil, but he is best known for his works that were turned into prints. Natalie often said that Tretyakov only worked on one canvas at a time, and he would shut himself away daily to paint. He would place the phone off the hook, close his studio door at 7 a.m. in the morning, and start painting until 5. Now let's discuss the why. What was the purpose of Tretyakov's artwork? And why were they so famous? Well, there are lots of different theories, but I will discuss the ones that I believe in. I believe that in locked down apartheid South Africa, people were excluded, felt disconnected internationally, and all the sanctions and stuff that went on in the country. By buying a Tretyakov print, they were able to travel in their living rooms. They could get a taste of the exotic. You see, when you paint somebody green, blue or purple, you're finally able to look past the race and see the human behind it. The speculation for Tretyakov being so popular in London is said that Londoners are colour-starved, and especially after the dreary World War II, people wanted colour, they wanted positivity, they wanted joy. In the 50s, London's economy was also booming. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan was famous for saying, "You've never had it so good." So there was money for people to buy art and prints. Tretyakov, however, didn't paint with a higher meaning. He painted because it gave him joy, and he wanted to share that joy with others. And he had no political motivation. He wanted to be the champion of easy-to-understand art, a painter of the people. Now, as Boris Gorolik states, whatever the outcome, this bold experiment raises bigger questions. Does popular art belong in an art museum at all? And if it does, how should it be represented there? Whether you think Tretyakov's art is brilliant or kitsch, Tretyakov keeps on coming back into popular culture again and again. I'm artist Lillian Gray, and I love teaching art history. I hope you love the story of Tretyakov and you feel inspired. Please remember to follow us, like and share our social media. It really helps us to build a strong channel and create more awesome content. Until next time.